By the spring of 1915, the Western Front had bogged down into trench warfare, and major French offensives over the winter had failed to break it. The Allies now faced pressure to prove to themselves and potential allies like neutral Italy that they were not losing the war. On March 29th, the British and French ministers for war and top military commanders Joseph Joffre and John French met to plan a fresh spring offensive. Despite the tensions between the two sides, they agreed to attack in the Artois region. General Victor d'Urbal's 10th Army would storm the high ground of Vimy Ridge, which dominated the Douai Plain. The British First Army under General Douglas Haig would support them by advancing at Aubers Ridge towards La Bassée. The Germans, though, attacked first at Ypres at the end of April, but the Allied offensive would go ahead even before that battle ended. French commanders spared no effort. 1,075 French guns would pound the Germans for several days, then fire an early form of creeping barrage that moved just ahead of the infantry. French aircraft would help the artillery direct its fire. Some French units also had the new horizon blue uniforms and Adrien helmets, and the French dug sap trenches into no man's land to bring their jumping-off point closer to enemy lines. The German 6th Army under Crown Prince Ruprecht was outnumbered, but had recently strengthened their defenses with more barbed wire, a second line of trenches in many places, and fortified villages at the foot of Vimy Ridge. They had very few reserves, though, since troops had been transferred east for the May offensive against the Russian Empire. German overall commander Erich von Falkenhayn also left for the east, leaving General Fritz von Lossberg in command in the west. The Second Battle of Artois began on May 9th, with extra urgency due to the recent successful Central Powers attack against Russia. General Philippe Pétain's corps made excellent progress up Vimy Ridge, breaking through German lines and reaching the crest. The Moroccan division took the lead, covering 4.5 kilometers in just 90 minutes. A French officer recalled, "The enemy was obviously in confusion. We met with some localized resistance, but we no longer met with anything organized. Even the artillery seemed to have lost its axis. Bursts of fire shot high in the air and at random mirrored the enemy's shambolic chaos." The French did much less well on the flanks, partly because their lack of heavy guns left German defenses intact. Fierce German defensive fire limited French gains on the Notre-Dame-de-Lorette height and the villages of Souchez and Neuville-Saint-Vaast, protected by a position known as the Labyrinth. Both sides suffered heavy losses, but the French on Vimy Ridge were now in an exposed, narrow salient. Still, the Crown Prince urgently requested reserves to contain the breach. French commanders were surprised by their success, and their reserves were too far back to arrive in time. The Germans rushed in their reserves more quickly, and their superior heavy artillery not only helped stop the French infantry, but often suppressed French artillery as well. Even worse for the French, faulty shells exploding in the breach destroyed dozens of guns and their crews. They retreated from the ridge after a few days, but d'Urbal insisted the villages must be taken, much to the frustration of divisional commander Émile Fayolle. "It won't lead to anything. The start of winter will still find us here, the flat ground covered with the dead." The French assaulted the villages again and again, finally taking the Labyrinth and Notre-Dame-de-Lorette at great cost. A German soldier recalled, "For every 10 dead, there is 1 left living. There are hardly any officers left. The ammunition is gone. Hunger makes itself heard in rumbling stomachs. The nerves, which have not known sleep for days, are in danger of being torn apart. Countless wounded, friend and foe, who nobody can help. One more such attack, and the French can march towards Souchez with shouldered rifles." But by now, the 10th Army was spent. d'Urbal ordered a pause to rebuild ammunition stocks and replace exhausted units. Meanwhile, the British and Indian attack at Aubers Ridge also began on May 9th. The British had 6 infantry divisions and 625 guns, but also lacked heavies and were short on shells. The Germans likely had just 7 battalions along the ridge, but they had more heavy guns and ample shell stocks. After a 40-minute artillery bombardment, the infantry attacked in two pincers 5 kilometers apart, helped by mines dug under German positions by a specialized tunneling unit. British and Indian troops went over the top and to the slaughter. British artillery had not been strong enough to break up the German wire or destroy their defensive positions, and many British shells were poorly made and did not explode. In many cases, German artillery or machine guns in camouflaged emplacements killed British and Indian troops immediately as they left their own trenches. Only a few British troops even made it into the German lines, and the Germans quickly killed or captured them. British trenches were blocked with wounded, preventing reserves from moving up. Haig called off the operation after 1 day, having lost 11,000 British casualties in a few hours for about 1,000 German. Most of the British dead fell within meters of their own lines. Haig tried again on May 15th with a larger attack at Festubert. For 10 days, British, Indian and Canadian troops attacked well-defended German lines. They made a few small gains, but the Germans simply withdrew to their next line, and British Empire losses were 3 times as high as the Germans. Behind these numbers lay great personal loss. German Lieutenant Alexander Pfeiffer lost his friend Walter Beutin. I crawled back into the trench and there saw the poor man lying, dirty and bloodstained. A piece of shrapnel had hit him in the chest. With Beutin, one of the best, most idealistic and bravest people had gone. His death especially affected me dearly because I was on very good terms with him and always got along well with him. On the opposite side, wounded and traumatized British Indian soldier Havildar Abdul Rahman wrote to a friend back home. For God's sake, don't come to this war in Europe. I am in a state of great anxiety, and tell my brother Muhammad Yaqub Khan, for God's sake, not to enlist. If you have any relatives, my advice is, don't let them enlist. Cannons, machine guns, rifles, and bombs are going day and night, just like the rains in the month of Sawan. Those who have escaped so far are like the few grains left uncooked in a pot. In my company, there are only 10 men left. The French tried to capture Vimy Ridge again on June 16th, using incendiary gas shells filled with carbon disulfide and phosphorus for the first time. They'd also moved up more of their new trench mortars to reduce the Germans' advantage in Minenwerfer. Once again, the Moroccan division led the way with a 1-kilometer advance to capture some high ground. But again, the French made little progress in the face of German artillery and fortifications. Northern Army Group Commander Ferdinand Foch called off the offensive on June 18th, and the Second Battle of Artois was over. The French army was becoming more skilled, but at huge cost. The failed attacks cost the French 140,000 casualties, the British about 28,000, and the Germans about 75,000. The battles in Artois were a disaster for the Allies, and the failure brought Allied tensions to a boiling point. Both General Joffre and General French now had a track record of failure since late 1914 that put them under severe pressure. British War Minister Lord Kitchener and General French did not see eye to eye, and French was suffering from the strain of the war, as he confided to a friend. My office is thick with the spirits of my dead friends. I sometimes people my room with these glorious friends, all boys compared to me, who have gone over. That silent army. Alas, alas, the room is getting small to hold even my intimate friends. Joffre thought General French was reluctant to support his offensives, while some other British leaders thought British resources should not be sent to the meat grinder in the West. General French blamed the shell shortage, which became a major scandal in the press and in Parliament, and resulted in David Lloyd George becoming Minister of Munitions. Arguments among the French were even hotter. Joffre's reputation had suffered badly, and even though War Minister Alexandre Millerand and Foch still supported him, his many critics included Generals Édouard de Castelnau and Pétain, who felt that constant offensives were wasting precious manpower. In July, General François Antoine wrote an anonymous letter to the French Parliament. Men are being uselessly slaughtered. The troops have lost their spirit and have lapsed into gloomy resignation. Time is on our side. Let us hold on. Let us manufacture the war material we need. Let us husband the men. And let us have a real army for use when other armies are worn out instead of wearing ours out for nothing. French parliamentarians also heard dramatic reports of shortages of rifles and shells, faulty shells, poor medical services, and hopeless small-scale attacks. Many concluded the High Command was attacking simply to put something in its daily communiques, but the government stuck with Joffre. The strain also showed between the Germans, despite their success. Most of the field commanders disliked Falkenhayn for his abrupt style, and Falkenhayn reprimanded Ruprecht for requesting the army reserves to stop the French at Vimy. As the decision-makers on both sides argued in summer 1915, the pressure on the Allies grew. Russia was asking for help, the Italian offensives against the Austrians had failed, and the Gallipoli landings were bogged down. The British and French had to do something, and Joffre hatched a plan for an even bigger offensive. This time, the British and French would again attack in Artois to break into the Douai plain and draw German reserves. At the same time, an even larger French attack would smash through German lines in Champagne with an attack brusqué to create a flank that could be exploited for decisive mobile warfare. They might even force the Germans out of the large Noyon salient in the center of the front. Some British and French politicians and generals opposed the ambitious plan, fearing high casualties, including field commanders Foch, Haig, and Durbal. But Joffre insisted the offensive was necessary to preserve French honor by helping Russia and to keep up the men's fighting spirit. Lord Kitchener reluctantly accepted, telling the British cabinet, "We have to make war as we must, not as we would like to." On the German side, von Lossberg warned Falkenhayn the Allies would attack again, but Falkenhayn disagreed and said the French didn't have the necessary courage. After weeks of delays, the Great Offensive began on September 25th. In the north, the British attacked near the village of Loos. Haig's plan was risky. Another pincer movement would lead to an 8-kilometer advance towards a canal, outflanking the Germans around Lens. The British far outnumbered the Germans, but the key was the first British use of chlorine gas. The British Special Brigade released the gas from canisters just as the Germans had done at Ypres a few months before. But the air was calm, and in some places the gas even seeped back into British trenches. British and Indian troops went over the top in cloth gas masks, straight into a hail of German machine gun fire. Some Scottish units were accompanied by bagpipers, including Danny Laidlaw, who received the Victoria Cross. Their momentum and numbers carried them into Loos, onto Hill 70, and into the main German strongpoint of Hohenzollern Redoubt, but British artillery had failed to knock out German positions and wire. With the attack bogged down, Haig sent in 2 fresh new army divisions, inexperienced volunteers who joined up at the start of the war. It was total chaos, as one British officer explained. Nobody from the brigade commander downwards had any idea of the situation at any stage of the proceedings. The British attack faltered under heavy flanking fire, a lack of artillery support, and confusion. German counterattacks then retook most of the lost ground over the next 2 weeks. German Lieutenant Alexander Pfeiffer described the aftermath. It looks terrible in the recaptured trenches. You only walk on English corpses on 40-meter-long stretches, including an English Major General over whom I have personally repeatedly climbed. Generals French and Haig blamed each other for the disaster, and by the end of the year, Haig took over as commander of the BEF. So the British had failed to break through at Loos. Meanwhile, the French tried again at Vimy Ridge. A few hours after the British attack on September 25th, the French attack in Artois began in the pouring rain. They pushed towards Souchez and Vimy Ridge, this time trying so-called oil stain tactics, where French troops immediately tried to exploit any small gains in German positions. But as before, well-positioned, mutually supporting German machine guns, powerful artillery, and rapid counterattacks blunted the French advance. 2nd Lieutenant Robert de Saubliau's unit advanced over a field covered in corpses from previous fighting. In spite of the bombardment, mines, and trench mortars, there's still wire, that deadly obstacle that cannot be crossed under fire. In front of me, a sergeant collapses, his hands clutching his stomach. I try to bandage him, but his intestines hang from 2 wounds. He convulses and rolls in the mud, but his movements soon slow. He cries like a little child. Other wounded men arrive and contemplate the agony of their comrade, but his suffering does not move them. They think only of themselves and how to escape. The French made less progress in Artois than they had in May, once again at heavy cost. Foch ordered limited attacks to continue for 2 more weeks to distract the Germans, who still controlled Vimy Ridge. As the British and French struggled in Artois, the main battle raged in Champagne. There, the Germans had improved their defenses and added a second line, but the French had concentrated more firepower than ever before. On September 25th, General de Castelnau's army group began the largest French offensive of the war so far, the Second Battle of Champagne. French artillery had pummeled German lines for several days, inflicting heavy casualties due to a lack of deep dugouts. French gunners even pretended to stop firing to lure the Germans up to the parapet before hitting them again. Swarms of French aircraft overflew German lines to help the artillery correct its fire. German Third Army commander Karl von Einem asked Falkenhayn for reinforcements, but he refused. A worried von Einem replied, "Ultimately, only the possible is possible." The French broke through along a 12-kilometer sector and took 18,000 Germans prisoner. Some French units used new tactics heavily based on assaults with hand grenades. The 27th Division even reached the German second line, an advance of 4 kilometers in just 2 hours, and the Moroccan division reached the key German position of Navarin Farm. German Corporal Oswald Eichler was among the stunned defenders. It was soon obvious that gas shells were exploding around us, and we had to react at once. Ignoring the heavy small arms fire, we dashed across to the soldiers' dugout and grabbed for our gas masks. I decided to take 5 men and investigate along the communications trench. We did not get far. Men in blue helmets had closed right up to the dugout and were attacking with hand grenades. In other areas, though, the Germans mowed down the French attackers or quickly recaptured trenches. A French soldier of the 315th Regiment recalled a counterattack near Aubers Ridge. We resisted the attack of the Germans, who were advancing on us with grenades in their belts. They sprayed us with bullets from short range, but they could not retake their trench due to our firepower. I was suddenly shaken by a violent detonation felt to my left. I turned around suddenly and saw Sous-Lieutenant Rignard lying full length on his back. I rushed towards him, but his chest was pierced by the full load of a grenade. I immediately took command and continued firing. Now Falkenhayn became concerned and released the reserves von Einem had requested. When the French tried to overcome the second German line on September 27th, though, they got nowhere. The reverse slope defenses were hard to target and out of range of some French field guns, and French infantry couldn't exploit breaks in the German line quick enough. French cavalry had moved up to exploit the rumored gap, but it never materialized. Short of shells, Castelnau ordered a halt. He tried again on October 6th, and French troops took Navarin Farm and the ruined village of Tahure, but not much else. Joffre finally called off the Champagne offensive on October 14th. The fall offensives were among the bloodiest of the war. The French lost 140,000 casualties in Champagne and 48,000 in Artois. The British lost 50,000 at Loos, while the Germans lost 82,000 in Champagne and 50,000 in the north. Among the dead were Hugues de Castelnau, the general's 3rd son to fall in the war, and 18-year-old John Kipling, son of British author Rudyard Kipling. On September 25th alone, it's estimated 23,000 Frenchmen were killed, likely making it the deadliest single day of the war for any nation. Despite these awful numbers, the Third Battle of Artois and the Second Battle of Champagne don't play a big role in historical memory of the war, even in France. So after unprecedented bloodletting and use of munitions, the Western Front was still locked in a stalemate at the end of 1915. General Pétain summed up the costly lesson. The Battle of Champagne has demonstrated the difficulty, if not the impossibility, in our current state of armament, our method of preparation, and opposing forces, of taking successive enemy positions in one wave. Neither the French nor the British had yet solved the riddle of trench warfare. They could get into the German lines, but not break through them. They still lacked heavy artillery and had problems with command and control, and infantry tactics were still inadequate. Millions of Allied soldiers had come to similar conclusions, like a frustrated British Indian soldier who wrote home. What you say in your letter about not being disloyal to the Emperor and it being the religion of Sikhs to die facing the foe is true. But if only you yourself could be here and see for yourself. Any shriveled, drugged-up fellow can fire the gun and kill a score of us at our food in the kitchen. Ships sail the sky like kites. Wherever you look, machine guns and cannon begin to shoot, and bombs fly out which kill every man they hit. The earth is mined and filled with powder. When men walk upon it, the powder is lit, and up go the men. Put swords or pikes or staves in our hands, and the enemy over us with like arms, then indeed we should show you how to fight face to face. But if no one faces us, what can we do? From now on, any Allied offensives would require much more materiel, more realistic objectives, and a greater role for Britain. The Germans, on the other hand, felt vindicated in their defensive doctrine and effective use of reverse slopes, wire, and counterattacks. Falkenhayn could now turn his attention to the changing situation in the Balkans, where Germany had gained a new ally. History is full of daring missions where a handful of men and women attempt the impossible against overwhelming odds. These raids don't always get the attention they deserve in general history documentaries, though. In our new series, History's Most Daring Raids, every month we explore the most famous and the lesser known, the most audacious and the most clandestine operations through history and why they worked or why they failed. And where can you watch History's Most Daring Raids? On Nebula, a streaming service we're building with other creators where you don't need to sift through a deluge of AI slop. Nebula is made and curated by humans, and it's available in 4K resolution on your browser, on your smartphone, smart TV, or streaming box like Apple TV or Roku. And that's not all. On Nebula, you can also watch all our regular videos ad-free and earlier than on YouTube. If you go to nebula.tv/The Great War, you can get an entire year of Nebula for just $30. Nebula is also a great gift. Just go to gift.nebula.tv/The Great War to give an entire year to family and friends, even if they already have an account. Whether you watch Nebula on your own or give it to someone else, you're supporting us here at Real Time History directly. We want to thank Sophie Soulière and Alexandre Lyons for their help with this episode. If you want to learn more about the Western Front in 1915, check out our previous episode about the Second Battle of Ypres and the use of poison gas. As usual, you can find all the sources for this episode in the video description. And if you're watching this video on Nebula or Patreon, thank you so much for the support. We couldn't do it without you. I'm Jesse Alexander, and this is a production of Real Time History, the only history channel that mirrors the enemy's shambolic chaos.